Hi everyone. Last talk of the evening, I'm going to talk about recent data protection developments in the world of AI. It's been a big year for generative AI and machine learning again, with a flurry of new models and services being rolled out. Alongside the evolution of the tech itself, there's been increasing attention from data protection authorities, especially in relation to training these models on personal data. I'll speak about that first before I move on to talk about the next frontier of this sector, agentic AI, which I think Simon said where the danger lies. Copying Hannah a bit there, but it's been the Gen AI race is still going on, with lots of different companies competing to develop the most capable AI abilities as quick as possible, and it's becoming a much busier market than it was this time last year. To effectively improve these AI models, I'm sure many of you know, there's three key components. You need huge amounts of energy, which is why countries and companies alike are now planning additional nuclear power stations just to keep the lights on in the AI systems. A lot of computing processing power. So if you're manufacturing sophisticated chips like NVIDIA, your shares are looking pretty great right now. And then the third component, which is in keeping with the theme of the evening, these models need loads and loads of data to be trained on and evolve and improve. And this is because the more data that models are trained on, the more patterns they can learn between words and part words, and between image pixels in the case of models that can do image generation. And better pattern recognition means better Gen AI performance. So it's no surprise really that some big tech companies, Meta, X and LinkedIn, were keen to use public posts on their platforms to use that to train their respective AI models. Social media platforms, as we all know, host a lot of human conversations, so they're a very valuable resource for training models and particularly getting them to understand all the nuances of linguistics and language. So the plan was for these big US tech companies to carry out novel, large-scale processing of European personal data. Who could possibly raise any issues with that? Cue the Irish DPC stepping in and the ICO, who raised concerns and acted quite quickly to intervene over the last summer. In a nutshell, each of these companies had to change their plans about training their respective AI models on public posts following engagement with these DPOs. In the case of Meta, it postponed its plans to train on Facebook and Instagram public posts for some time. X gave an undertaking to the Irish DPC in the Irish High Court proceedings, promising to remove some EU public posts from data that had been collected into training data sets for its AI model called Grok. And finally, LinkedIn, similar story. They started using UK user data on LinkedIn to train its AI models, but swiftly suspended that after the ICO raised concerns. Particular areas of focus for the DPC and the ICO were whether companies had a valid legal basis for training, were they being transparent enough to users, and were users being given enough control over their data being used for training. For example, could they easily opt out or object? Moving on to the end of 2024, that was when the DPC published, the EDPB published their opinion on AI training. And I think it provides a bit of context to the Data Protection Authority's concern over AI training on personal data, even where that personal data is maybe already in the public domain because the users put it there themselves. And it's basically because it's relatively difficult to predict now all the different types of use cases that AI models might be used for in the future, and how that might have practical impacts on people's privacy in a practical way, and especially when the tech is evolving so quickly. So, for example, this opinion discusses how models trained on personal data might be misused in unintended ways by bad actors. For example, for fraud, for harassment, for impersonation. There's been a lot of deepfake problems recently. Or how even intentional uses of AI models may pose risks such as discrimination. for example, in situations where job applications are pre-selected by AI models during the recruitment process. So I think a key rationale in the regulator focus being on training is maybe not just about the training in and of itself, especially when it's on public information, but rather in these uncertain ways in which AI models might be deployed, used in practice by different companies in the future. I'll change gears now and move on to what is expected to be the next big game changer in the AI space, agentic AI. Agentic AI has quite a literal name. It describes a system that is powered by Gen AI technology, like large language models, as its backbone, but to provide much more complex AI agents to work for you to achieve goals that you might task them with. These goals would be much more sophisticated than simple requests you might ask an AI chatbot today. And one of the key features is that they would be much more autonomous, and they would be able to reason in a more human-like way using multi-step decision making. So to give you just a practical example, in the future, you might log on to a new AI holiday booking service and say to it, I would like a 7-day beach holiday with my partner in July in Europe, budget £2,000, not too touristy. Then you can relax for the rest of your evening while the AI agent will just organise that holiday for you with minimal or maybe even no human intervention at all. So that would be quite a big leap forward in AI capability compared to what we have today. And this type of system does, of course, raise some interesting questions from the data protection perspective. I put together a very simplified flowchart of how personal data could be processed by an agentic AI system to keep with this example. So users would register with the service by usual staff giving their personal information, setting up their credit card details, providing their passport information for this type of service, and then provide their holiday instructions, what sort of holiday they would like to have. And then after that, the agent would essentially decide what to do next and carry out all those steps itself. To assist it, the system would have interfaces in place, shown by the arrows, enable it to communicate with and share data with lots of other services in an online ecosystem. So with this example, after you've given your instructions, the AI system might think, well, I need to communicate with a service like BBC Weather to check where it's going to be sunny in July. I'll obviously need to speak to and share data with a service like Skyscanner so I can book flights. Similar thing with booking.com for hotel and taxi transfers. And then it might just decide, oh, I probably should supplement that with an app service like Google Maps so I can understand geography, make sure the hotel isn't too far away from the airport, etc. And so this means that user data is going to be flowing both ways through APIs, with the AI agent autonomously making decisions about what personal information to use, how to use it, who to share it with. And there's some unpredictability of that autonomous AI decision making that leads to novel questions about how GDPR rules will apply. So when you've got a very complex ecosystem, which would probably look more like a labyrinth if I let an engineer draw it, but how are you going to explain that in a user-friendly way to data subjects using all these different services? It would probably be a very hefty privacy notice. Then there's GDPR roles. What GDPR role will each company in this ecosystem have? Where will their respective responsibilities start and finish? Definitely expect some joint controllership discussions here. And then we'll need to think about what sort of user consents that an agent will need to collect from the human user at the start before using and sharing their personal data in lots of different contexts. You'd probably hope that they would at least check in with you before using your credit card to put a hefty deposit down on a holiday that it thinks might be just up your alley. So I think several new types of challenges that need to be worked through for agentic AI in parallel to them actually being developed technologically. And holidays is just one example. So the principle is that the more training and autonomy you give an agentic AI system, the more data you give it, and the more tools you give it by integrating into these online ecosystems, the larger its potential. But reference to 2001 Space Odyssey in the middle is because HAL 9000 was a agentic AI system which had maybe a bit too much control over the spaceship. I won't say more than that in case you haven't seen it. Yeah, maybe where some danger might lie. I think, but developers are excited about new uses, and companies are interested in how they might use agentic AI to enhance their businesses. I think the timeline for these systems, when they're going to be reliable enough to actually go to market is less clear, especially when they're actually going to hit the more tightly regulated EU market. But this is definitely an interesting area to pay attention to. I'll leave it there for today, so thank you very much for listening.